Korea eats its dogs. China licks its plate. Germans kill pigs. Remembering 9/11. Hello, my people. It's your Negro with aptitude and host of the Blackboard, Mickee Lee. Welcome to this week's Weekend Wrap-Up. As you know, on the Weekend Wrap-Up series, I highlight those topics that are most important for us to keep abreast of in terms of our advancement towards obtaining reparations, and also topics that will affect our overall quality of life in the United States and around the world. As the grand solar minimum increases and the effects are beginning to be seen all over the globe, the growing zones that we're used to having will be shifted to places that haven't grown food in a very, very long time, some as long as a century or more. In reverse, many of us live in countries that are used to abundance but will be moving into famine. So it's important for us to keep our minds sharp on these topics so that we can do all we can to get prepared, and we can also shift the way we think of this life so that we are prepared to stand before the Lord and be welcomed into his kingdom. But while we yet rest on the earth, this information gives us time to prepare, time to grow food, store food, time to move if we can, but also just time so that we're not surprised and we will shift according to what the Lord provides for us. All right, let's get into it. Korea eats its dogs, or to be more precise, North Korea. But believe me, before it's all over with, both Koreas will be resuming eating dog meat. Yes, that sounds shocking to us here in the West, especially in the United States, where dogs form so much a part of the lives of many of us. There are friends, there are comforts. For many, there are fur babies and have taken the place of actual human babies. So we can't imagine them being confiscated. But the question is, why? The quirky North Korean leader, Kim Jong-un, has reportedly condemned pet ownership as a decadence and too Western. So he has ordered the dogs to be confiscated. Some have wound up in zoo on display. But most North Korean dog owners are not fooled by this movement. You see, the country has been in dire straits for many, many, many years. And recently, the North Korean leader even opened up the grain storage that is kept, the private reserve that's kept for his family, in order to feed the people. Dog meat has been a staple throughout Asia for a very, very long time. And despite the best efforts of animal rescue, this practice continues, though it had been in somewhat decline throughout North Korea, as they were able to gain more of a capitalistic undergirding for the socialist and communist leadership or government styles they are under. But with the flooding and the destruction of food sources over the last few years, plus the sanctions that the country is under from other places in the world, the people are starving to death. So most North Korean pet owners understand this to mean that their poor little Fluffy or Fido will probably wind up on someone's dinner plate. Why am I bringing this to you? Because it's just a matter of time before it happens here in the United States. If you've been paying attention, especially to my Waste Not Wednesdays series, you will see from some of the earlier videos that I've talked about how much food is being destroyed in the United States, either through acts of God, meaning the floods or the droughts or tornadoes, or because now, under the guise of, or under the cloak, I should say, of COVID-19, millions and millions of tons of potatoes, for example, buried in the ground because they said they can't bring them to market. Millions of animals killed because they say they're too fat to keep feeding them and they can't bring them to market. Millions and millions of acres of onions, for example, allowed to go to waste because they say they don't have enough workers to pick the crops. So once again, it's very important for us to make sure that we pay attention to what's going on in other parts of the world, because it's just a matter of time before it reaches here. China licks its plate. China launched a clean plate campaign about a month or two ago, and they are doing an all-out assault against food waste. Now, in the authoritarian regime that China is under, the China Communist Party, just about every area of life is closely monitored. And so for people to be able to eat what they want was something of a luxury, something of a freedom, something that they very much cherished. But now that so much of China's agriculture has been wiped out due to the massive floodings there, the massive monsoons, and other types of natural disasters, the Chinese government is trying to stave off famine. And so they are closely monitoring how much food people are eating. And as a matter of fact, they very recently passed legislation stating that women would receive less rice than men. You've heard it. Women will be receiving less rice than men. They are urging people to utilize delivery services just like they are here in the United States. And they are beginning to go through people's trash and weigh the trash to find out how much of the trash consists of food. Recently, their grains have been pretty much demolished because of the massive flooding. And there is something called like a black mildew that is seeped into the grain because of the moisture caused by the water. So even if the grain was on the very, very top and didn't actually touch water, it's the type of fungus that can work its way all the way through an entire storage of grain. Well, they are not going to throw that grain out. They are going to work that grain into their food supply, which means people will be eating contaminated food. I want you to think about if you've heard of any of the dumpster diving that became popular here in the last decade or so. Primarily middle-class white kids that had, lost their way, I'll put it politely. And so they were going around dumpster diving and reclaiming food from trash cans. Once again, if you think this is just happening in China under the communist regime, I want you to shake yourself and recognize that it's just a matter of time before it happens here in the United States. California has already passed legislation monitoring how much water you use to take a shower. There are other places in the country that too are monitoring how much food is being thrown out or how much is being put into the trash can. So this soon will be coming to a United State near you. Germany kills pigs. Now, most of us understand that if we enjoyed bacon for breakfast this morning, that means that somewhere a pig was killed last night. So talking about the killing of pigs may not appear to be noteworthy until you start to pay attention to the number of pigs that have been killed worldwide. Germany is now recently announced finding swine fever in some of the herds in its among pig farmers, so in its pig industry. As a result, they are going to be culling millions and millions of the animals. Now, swine fever is not apparently a problem for humans, but it is a problem for the pigs. And so they are going to be killing millions of these pigs in order to keep the fever from spreading. Here's the trouble, though. In China alone, hundreds of millions of pigs have been killed. Let me repeat, hundreds of millions of pigs have been killed over the last few years over the same thing. This swine fever keeps popping up, interestingly, in places with large production of pork. This means that this is a food source that will be taken off the menu, not only in China, not only in Germany, but around the world. Many of you are not aware that, in fact, most of the pork production in the United States is done not by American companies, but by Brazilian-owned companies. And the largest importer of these products is China, who also owns a lot of the pork production in the United States. So when you add this together with the cows that have been culled or lost to natural disasters, as well as other animal production like chicken, this means that people are going to have to get used to a meatless diet very soon. I don't want you to worry, though. If you read your Bible, in Genesis, it tells you that when God made the human body, he never intended for us to eat animals in the first place. Now, this is not a vegetarian campaign. I definitely understand why people enjoy meat. I myself am still a meat eater, though I am probably going to become a steadfast vegetarian here shortly, just because I don't like the abuse that is involved with animal agriculture. But what I want you to be aware of is that things on your dinner plate are going to be changing rapidly. Although we could do what the world does and pretty much ignore these signs and be glib about them and dismissive even and say, oh, it's a result of the grand solar minimum, which is certainly true. There is changes in the sun which affect the growth zones that happen on the planet Earth, as well as the climate, as well as the movement of the land, as well as the availability of water, and so many other things. But who controls the sun? We know, if you're wise, that the sun, it did not just evolve from nothing. In fact, nothing cannot evolve from nothing. There must be a something in there somewhere. So the question is, why are all these changes happening? Why is there swine fever among the pigs? Why is there so many animals being lost to natural disasters, and even multitude of examples of them just washing up dead on the shore with no trauma, just washing up dead, birds dropping from the sky, animals diving themselves off cliffs? And some people would say, well, maybe the animals don't know about death. If you've ever been with an animal to a vet, they know about death. They know about pain. They know about hurt. If you've ever been to a slaughterhouse, then you know that animals know about death. If you've ever watched wild animals, you know they know about death. Otherwise, they wouldn't be running and trying to outmaneuver the predator. What this means for us, though, us humans, is a wake-up call. I know that it's easy to dismiss it when people keep saying we're living in the last days, and they've been saying it for over 2,000 years. But there are things occurring now that have never occurred before in the history of mankind. Yes, there have been grand solar minimums. Yes, there have been traumatic natural disasters, quote unquote, natural disasters. Yes, there has been famine. Yes, there have been droughts. but we are getting ready to see them at a level that has never before been experienced. And again, the question is why? If you're willing to look at your Bible, you'll find out. Luke 21 tells us there will be great earthquakes in various places, and we've had that going on, famines and pestilences. Well, the COVID, and depending on how you feel about it, could be considered a pestilence. There will also be terrors and signs from heaven. There's been more astrophysical activity now than in just about any other time in recorded history. And of course, this broadcast is talking about indicators of the coming famine. We are currently in food shortages, but it will turn to famine. In Amos 8, we find out the days are coming, the Lord says, when I will send a famine on the land, not a famine of bread, nor a thirst for water, but of the hearing of the Lord, the words of the Lord. Well, if he takes away our food and he takes away the water, he makes the climate conditions hard. Maybe that will shake some folks up, and that will give them a thirst for the living water, which is Jesus Christ. But the main thing you should pay attention to is presented in Amos chapter 4, in which the Lord talks about the various types of changes and disasters he brought about upon the earth. But he says, yet you did not return to me. I withheld the rain when there was a harvest. I sent rain on one city and not on another, on one field and not on another. People had to come from one city to another to drink water, yet you did not return to me. I struck you with blight and mildew, and your gardens, your vineyards. In other words, you couldn't grow anything. I sent the locusts. Oh, by the way, the locusts are on their way, and actually I had expected them to arrive by now, but there is locust on the way. Yet you did not return to me. That's what this is about, returning to the Lord. Please do not harden your heart when you hear this message, but turn to him. Check out some of my videos about my own testimony and about Christianity. The Lord does not want anyone to wind up in hell. It grieves him deeply when people send themselves there. And if that's a surprise for you to hear, then be surprised and embrace the truth. From the Lord's perspective, he doesn't send you to hell. You send yourself. So listen, I want you to wake up. I want you to get ready in the natural. But I also want you to understand that you need to return to the Lord while he may be found. And finally tonight, we get to remembering 9/11. Now, on September 11, 2001, so almost 20 years ago, we had the Twin Towers in New York City, in which 2 airplanes flew into those towers, and then they did damage in other areas. There are, of course, conflicting reports. Some people say this was an inside job and that the United States government was part of it. Others blame it on the Saudis and the Iraqis and so forth and so on. And that gave cover to pursue Osama bin Laden. Whatever it is you believe, I want black folks to pay attention to something. We are supposed to remember 9/11 for the rest of our lives. We are never supposed to forget 9/11. In fact, there's a hashtag, never forget. We are supposed to remember it in honor, and we are supposed to take steps so that it is a part of the national dialogue every year and the national remembrance. However, when black folks talk about slavery, when black folks talk about Jim Crow, when black folks talk about segregation, when black folks talk about discrimination on the job until well into the 70s, when black folks talk about how even in the year 2020, our lives are still not valued to the level of even an illegal immigrant, we're told to just get over it. Well, we're not going to just get over it. And on 9/11, I want us to remember whether or not we have received reparations. That's what I want to remember. If we have received reparations, I want us to celebrate receiving that reparations, which should be a multi-tier, multi-year production. And if we haven't, then I want us to push harder to make sure that we get it. This remembering 9/11, and I'm not saying it shouldn't be remembered. I'm saying if it should be remembered, which was one event which unfortunately affected thousands of people, 3,000, 3,400 people, then slavery, which affected millions and millions and millions of people, should also be remembered. If the Jews are allowed to remember the Holocaust, something that happened over 70 years ago, did not happen in the United States, and from which they have received billions and billions of dollars, then we too should be able to remember and to collect our check. If the Native Americans are able to remember something that happened over 150 years ago, and for which they have received land and trillions of dollars in repayment by now, even though they're supposed to be sovereign entities, we too should be able to remember. If the Japanese can antagonize the United States into a war, World War II, and then have their country rebuilt and then by the United States, and then have their country defended by the United States for decades and decades and decades, and then that doesn't count the amount of money that the Japanese survivors of the encampments were given, then we too should be able to remember. My point to you, Black folks, is stop getting played. Stop allowing what has happened to us to be pushed under the rug and treated as so much, hey, just get over it. If the nation is not getting over 9/11, which many believe to be an inside job, then we're not getting over slavery, which we know to be an inside job. It's your Negro with Aptitude and host of the BLACKboard, Mickee Lee, signing off. Thank you for joining me on another episode of the Weekend Wrap-Up, brought to you by the BLACKboard. This is your host, Mickee Lee. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Also be sure to check out the description box where I have placed the links to some of the research done for tonight's episode. Also, let me know what you think of the stories presented. You can do that in the comment box. Be sure also to check out some of my other videos and other series, such as Money Mondays, where we celebrate Black entrepreneurship, ADOS FBA entrepreneurship, Waste Not Wednesdays, where we discuss ways to prepare for the upcoming food shortages and famine. We learn how to grow food. We learn how to do first aid. We learn how to do small animal husbandry. There's a whole lots of different topics of that nature that we'll be discussing. Faithful Fridays, where we discuss Christianity in general and Black Christianity specifically, and the strategies we can use to return to God and remain faithful to Him in these last days. All right, we'll see you in the next video.